We're recording.
Okay, hi, I'm Aniqa.
I'm Jeremy.
I'm 20 years old.
And I'm 23 years old.
And we've been in a relationship together for about 4 months, I think. Yeah.
At this point, 4 months, yeah.
Yeah. And for our first video together, we thought we would talk about what a relationship is like between someone who's really emotional, which is me, and someone who's incredibly logical, which is Jeremy. And whether or not that's sustainable or whether or not that can continue for a long period of time. When we first met and when we first started dating and you noticed that I was emotional, we were getting to know each other, did you think you would be able to withstand a long-term relationship with me?
I mean, honestly, when we first met, I didn't even anticipate you being as emotional as you are, because you're ridiculously emotional. But I don't take myself and think is my emotional sensitivity gonna overlap with yours? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. Explain.
I'm thinking is my belief or my kind of rigidness, is that gonna interfere with your emotional sensitivity?
Mm-hmm. When was the first time? The first time I feel for me that I knew Jeremy was super logical was within when we first met. We spent a few days together. Actually, I spent a few days at his house, and then I went home and we saw each other. Was the next time we saw each other at the holiday party, your office holiday party? No. I came back because we wanted to see a movie, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jeremy had told me he had never been on a date before. So I was like, okay, this Friday I'll take you out on a date, and we were gonna go rock climbing. And then during the week, because we saw each other on a weekend, during the week, I asked him if he wanted to see a movie, and he was like, oh, we can't do all of it on Friday. We can't go rock climbing and see the movie on Friday. So I was like, okay, I'll go to the movie by myself. And then he was like, no, I love you. I'll come. I want to watch the movie with you. So then I came, right? And then maybe 2 days out of that week, I spent the night over at his place. And then we had a holiday party that I went to where an incident happened. Over.
A ridiculous thing happened where she got so drunk and passed out, and I had to carry her out of the holiday party.
And it was probably the most.
With my bare hands.
And I was completely knocked out. It wasn't like I was in and out. I was knocked. You could not wake me up. And I think even to this day, that was the most mad you've ever been at me, right?
Right, for sure.
Yeah. And the morning after, so what had happened was he carried me, literally physically carried me wedding style, down the stairs into a cab. And his friend, who's also his coworker, was at the party. And they took a cab to her place because she lived close to where the holiday party was compared to him. They took a cab over to her place, and I slept in her room. She slept on the floor, I slept in the bed. She's a really kind person. That's a side note. But anyways, the next morning, I think that was the first time when I realized you were super logical. Because I called him and I was apologizing and stuff, and he was hyper focused on the fact, because he asked me, there was an open bar at the holiday party, and he asked me, what did you say?
I asked you.
He asked me as a joke, right? Or was it a joke?
About how many drinks?
No. He asked me, am I gonna have to carry you out of here?
I said that, literally, yeah.
Yeah. He said that as a joke, I think, right?
Yeah, before that. It was a couple hours before you did what you did.
Yeah. He asked me, because I was drinking a lot, and he asked me, well, Aniqa, slow down, am I going to have to carry you out of here? And he said that in kind of a charming, silly way, and I told him no. And the next day over the phone, he kept on repeating over and over again, you said one thing, and you did the opposite. And I kept on trying to justify myself or explain myself, being like, I didn't mean to, that wasn't my intention, blah, blah, blah. I kept on just repeating different versions of that, and he was hyper-focused on that. And that was the first time I realized he was super logical and super serious. When was the first time you realized I was super emotional?
It was the first time you broke down in front of me,
When was that?
When we broke up for the first time.
When did we break up for the first time?
We broke up, I don't know if you remember,
I really don't.
when you sat down and, remember when I was, being me, I was being rigid, and I was just I need to make a more logical choice. I need to be the smart one.
Oh,
like that.
why were we gonna break up that time? Do you remember?
I don't know. I think we got into a
Oh,
little
'cause-
argument.
Was it because I was high and your mom found out?
Oh, well, yeah, yes.
You think it was that day, right?
Yeah, that was part of it.
Yeah, okay, so the night before, I had smoked weed, and I smoked weed outside of his apartment, and he still lives with his parents and his sister, his parent and his sisters. And I had come in, and I walked past his mom. She never said anything. But the next morning, my clothes still reeked, and she smelled it the next morning. I don't know if she smelled it the night before and she just didn't say anything or what it was. But when she smelled it the next morning, she freaked out. She was yelling and screaming, and Jeremy had to like calm her down. And I think that's why we were gonna break up, because I was like, how could I possibly be with someone who doesn't smoke weed and who's so judgmental of it? Because at the time he was more judgmental of it than he was now.
Right.
And you're
So,
like,
yeah, I mean, in that, like, even in that scenario, like, I learned to deal with somebody who's extremely emotional. So I feel like I learned something from that, which is like, you know, even if somebody's gonna choose to do something, that it's their choice. And if you're gonna be with a person, you kind of have to try to like not change yourself, but understand where they're coming from, so you can understand how you can work with what they have.
yeah. So, like, we got into an argument about that, obviously. No one likes getting yelled at by their parents. And I was like, I have a big tendency, and this comes from, like, my emotional behavior and probably from, like, my reactions to past situations. I tend to run away from situations or push people away. So when we had that argument, instead of trying to resolve the argument, my first reaction was we should just break up. I smoke a lot of weed. You don't smoke weed at all. You can't smell like it ever. We should just break up. And because he's super logical, he was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. We should do that. And I bursted out crying. I was crying a lot. Like, I sat down on the floor and I was sobbing. That was one of the hardest times, like, I cried.
So it was like, yeah, I mean, guys, when ladies cry,
When ladies cry.
it hurts. I mean, it hurt me in that, you know.
And the thing is, like, this also reinforced that he's super logical. I didn't know he was hurt because I was crying and he was giving me space, which is, you know, the logical thing to do. But he wasn't, like, you know, comforting me or, like, looking upset himself. He
I
was
mean,
like,
what do women think in that instance, though? Like, if a woman's crying,
they, like, I think a lot of women,
they want to be...
they want to be comforted. Like,
Right.
if the other person cares about me, they'll, like, come and comfort me and try to get
Right.
me to calm down.
Right,
you know?
but that wasn't my initial reaction.
Yeah, his initial reaction is she's crying because of something that happened between us. So
Right.
I should give her space because
Right.
she's upset about us.
But this is where lack of communication comes in, because I didn't really ask you.
Yeah. And I
Why?
also didn't tell him what I wanted. I didn't tell him come sit with me.
Right. So that wasn't resolved. That was our first kind of big fight.
Where we kind of really saw each other, saw how each other reacts in stressful situations. And he reacts, like I said, very solution based, very like, oh, okay, if you think it's not going to work out, it's not going to work out, that's fine. And I react very emotionally, crying. I remember, what was I saying over and over again? I remember I was saying something over and over again. Do you remember?
I feel like you were like just saying, don't do this, or something to that effect.
Yeah. And
I try to like leave that out of my mind because it's not a great memory. I'm more addressing it now, but you know.
And how do we resolve that? What do you remember? Like, how do we resolve that? How do we...
We talked through it.
You
know?
think so?
Yeah.
Do you remember what we talked about specifically?
I think, I don't remember what we talked about specifically, but we talked, and I feel like we both came to the conclusion that we have to talk through things. And I feel like over the course of our relationship, that's what we've kind of been able to do, you know?
I think for both emotional and logical people, this is true. Communication always doesn't come easy, and it's for different reasons. So for Jeremy, I feel like sometimes he doesn't want to communicate things because it seems so obvious to him. Like, it's something that I should already know. It seems so simple. And for me, sometimes I don't want to communicate things because the emotional side of me is like, if he loves me, he'll know this about me. He'll get that from like my body language or from my action. And also sometimes when Jeremy's tired or when we're talking about something for a prolonged period of time, obviously the logical thing to do is this conversation is going nowhere. I don't want to have it anymore.
Right.
And sometimes when I'm super emotional, I like, this is another way that I don't communicate. I'm just like, I start crying and I'm like, he's being super mean. He's telling the truth and the truth hurts me. I don't want to hear the truth anymore. And I feel like the only way to sustain, because me and Jeremy are very different in, I think, a lot
In
of
like
ways.
every way.
In every way. We're like the opposite. If I exist here, he definitely exists here. We're not in the middle at all. And I think one of the reasons we've been able to sustain a relationship for as long as we have, because we've broken up a lot.
A lot. Like, when I say a lot, I mean like every day. A lot.
And that's definitely because of me. I'm the one who breaks up with him, but something that like you've learned is like, you can't always just like, just because that's what I'm saying, if that's not what you want, you can't just agree with it.
Right.
Something that you'll be like, oh, I didn't really want to break up, but because you were saying it.
Right. It's like
Yeah.
learning to take accountability for like your actions and like voicing what you want.
Yeah.
In a situation where it goes back to communication. It's just super vital to like, I think, some of the health of a relationship.
I think, first of all, understanding that the truth sometimes is super hurtful. Like when someone is telling you the truth about something you do or something that you've done or how an action has affected them, it can be super hurtful because the truth can be critical. It can make you seem like you have some faults. And I think what's really important in a relationship is communicating the truth, even if it's going to hurt the other person. Because if you don't, I think it makes resentment grow and it doesn't really solve the root of problems.
Right, but I feel like a lot of people out there are going to think if they tell the truth that they're going to lose something.
Yeah.
And I feel on either side, men or women, you know, but getting comfortable with just being honest and open is actually in the end more rewarding than being able, you know what I mean, than just hiding things and like lying, and because it always just catches up to you, you know.
And something that I've told Jeremy a lot, like being truthful doesn't necessarily mean you have to be cruel. You don't have to say something in a super blunt,
Yeah, and I'm terrible at that. I'm still learning that.
forceful way. I think truth that exists, like when you try to tell someone the truth in a kind way, is the best way to go in a relationship. And something that's super important that we both had to learn is communication isn't just about saying what you want to say. It's about communicating in a way where the other person will comprehend what you're trying to communicate. So he listens to things very differently than I do. So when I'm trying to tell him something, I have to speak very specifically and get to the point. He doesn't like a lot of like circling back, repetition, a lot of vague statements. He likes very specific, to the point statements. And with him, I'm very sensitive, so when he's telling me the truth about something, he has to kind of word it in a way that's not hurtful. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
How do you go about it? How do you go about it when you're trying to tell me the truth about something, but...
Well, you know, dealing with a sensitive person, I feel as though you need to understand their level of sensitivity first and then kind of try to adjust your language to like the way they talk, you know, because if not, and you're kind of like live within yourself, it makes things really difficult. It just makes things really difficult. But
this is a perfect example. I'm gonna give an example of something like you would adjust and something I would adjust. So like, let's say Jeremy calls me annoying, right? That would hurt my feelings. I would respond poorly to that. But if Jeremy says, this thing that you're doing is annoying me, he changes his language in a very slight way that makes a big impact on me.
right, and it's just understanding that like just offering ways I can like speak, do you know what I mean? Like if she says this hurts me the way you're talking, then I have to adjust the way I'm talking because it's not the right language, do you know what I mean? But I'm not necessarily changing myself, I'm just changing my language that makes her feel more comfortable.
Yeah, he's still telling me the truth, but he's just telling me the truth in a way where I would respond well and we could both be productive with the problem. And like, something that I think emotional people really need to understand is sometimes you have to communicate things that you think you shouldn't communicate. So something like that happens a lot is when I'm upset, I expect him to like instantly comfort me. But he can't read my mind, and sometimes I just have to say it. That doesn't mean he loves me any less or he pays attention to me any less. That just means that he's waiting for me to give consent in a way to do something because he's afraid that if he does it without me letting him know that's what I want, it might make the situation worse. So usually, like, when I'm upset now, I'll simply just ask him, can I get a hug? Can you hold me? Whatever. And I feel like that's really hard for emotional people. They think, like, if the person loves them, they should just know what they want. But I think it's important to distinguish that your partner isn't a mind reader, and just because you communicate that you want something doesn't mean that that action becomes any less valuable.
Right. Right. You know, and I'm an extremely rigid person, so all of these things, you know, I've learned over time. I'm not there yet.
I'm not there yet either. I'm still super emotional. I think we work on, like, we work on qualities that negatively affect our relationship every day. I
Yeah,
think.
continuously.
Yeah, and I think that's also really important, that you're not going to fix it right away. That you're just going to have to keep putting in effort, and it's never going to be, you're fixed. It's going to always be like checking in with each other, making sure things are okay.
Yeah.
Do you think a relationship can sustain between
an emotional person
and a logical person?
For sure. For sure. Just, guys, I urge you to communicate. Super important. Keep that in the forefront of your mind, and I think, you know, as time goes on, you'll have successful relationships. But
oh, something that I forgot to mention, I also think it's important to know your partner's love language, and like...
Yeah, that's like a whole nother video.
But that, I feel like that plays into communication.
Yeah, but that's like something super...
that's another
that's
whole...
dense, yeah.
Yeah. But I hope this video was helpful. We tried to be as specific as we could be. And I hope you guys maybe learned something or found something interesting.
Alright guys, until next time. Peace.
It didn't die.
It didn't die. We had 3 minutes of experience.
How long was it?